Hello, good evening, and here we are on another episode of LinkedIn Local India Online, virtual, powered by Maersk and Ocean Pro by Maersk, innovating excellence all around us. A stellar panel here today talking about the startup ecosystem, innovations, opportunities, obstacles at all. There are 49 of you that have joined in so far. Just wait for a couple more minutes to let everybody come in. In the meantime, I'm really excited about all the conversations and the dialogues that are going to happen today. I'm looking forward to all the inputs that my friends here have brought with so many years of experience behind them, dealing day in and day out of everything startup, everything ecosystem, everything funding, everything opportunities, everything innovation, and everything else of that tune around them. So just give us like a one more minute or maybe 30 seconds, and I will hand on the baton to Vivek for all the proceedings then. In that time, first of all, a very good evening to everybody here. Thank you for spending your Wednesday evening with us, learning, leveraging together. I think we can start. So with that, Vivek, it's over to you. Let's get the evening started and let's start the dialogues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Preeti. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you today. It gives me immense pleasure to announce the next LinkedIn Local India Online. The theme for today is Startups and Innovation, Opportunities and Obstacles. It is powered by Maersk and Ocean Pro by Maersk, Accelerating Innovation. My name is Vivek Chadha, and I, along with Preeti Chaudhary, will be your host for today. We have a stellar panel lineup. Very happy to introduce them. We have with us Abhay Tandon. He's the director and head of Lowe's Innovation Labs India at Lowe's. We have Shilpa Sri Nayak. She's the head of Open Innovation at Solgen Global Solutions Center. We have with us Gauri Shankar Paramsivam. He's the head of Maersk Accelerator at Ocean Pro India and China at Maersk Global Service Centers. With us Ashok Chandavarkar. He's the director of Strategic Initiatives at Intel India. And we have with us Millie Srivastava. Millie manages Digital Futures Startups at Diageo India. I heartily welcome all of our panelists and thank you for sparing the time to join us today. I also thank all of our audience for coming and participating in today's LinkedIn Local India Online, and hope that you derive immense value from the same. For the questions, hoping there are many, please keep them ready in the chat box that you see at the bottom of your screens. So without much further ado, I request you to introduce LinkedIn Local to all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Vivek, and a very warm welcome and a good evening to everyone once again, officially this time. My job today, right now here, is to introduce the concept of LinkedIn Local India to you. LinkedIn Local is a LinkedIn property. It is an online to offline meetup concept wherein members who are either connected to each other or not yet connected to each other meet each other to connect, communicate, and collaborate, learn and leverage from each other's networks and relationships. With the onset of the pandemic, all we have done is moved it online. So here we are in the virtual avatar of LinkedIn Local India Online at this wonderful discussion about innovation, about strategy, about opportunities, about obstacles that this unknown, unseen virus has dramatically thrown into all of our lives. So that is what LinkedIn Local is all about. Secondly, also the topic for today, which is startups and innovation, opportunities and obstacles. Personally, for me, I'm a half glass full person. So I'm really enthused to see the kind of innovation that has become radical from incremental, And it is amazing to see the kind of pivots that people have taken in the last 5 months or so to either survive or the ones that have innovated have sort of stayed in the fray. The ones that have not have sort of gone on the sidetrack. Such an interesting topic, such a wonderful panel here today. And I'm looking forward to all the conversations. So with that, let me invite Abhay Abhay, please come and share your views in terms of the topic today. What do you see for innovations, for startups, for are there any opportunities? Are there any obstacles standing in our path? All yours, Abhay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Preeti. Good evening, everyone. And thank you so much for taking your time to listen to us. And I'm hopeful that by the end of the session we'll have exchanged some interesting notes and our experiences that can really help understand how the landscape of innovation is changing. So before I talk to you about some of the opportunities or where we're headed, right? Let me just take a quick couple of minutes to introduce Lowe's and Lowe's Innovation Labs. Just to set that context. Uh, so Lowe's, I'm not sure if a lot of people in India are aware of Lowe's or not, but then it's a 99-year-old company that has, of course, through the 99 years has gone through a lot of change, right? And what started off as a small hardware store in a small rural or rather rural town has grown into a Fortune 40 company today, right? And that serves about 18 million customers every week and across US and Canada. That's a big number, right? And in the fiscal year of 2019, we had a top line of sales of about $72 billion, and we serve through the omni-channel presence that we have 2,200 stores and the .com presence, and apart from the other channels. And in total, we have about 300,000 people or 3 lakh people working with us globally, right? As we grew, we also learned that there are a lot of changes that we had to adapt to, right? Preeti was mentioning about constant change and technology volatility, consumer expectations, and basis that either you disrupt or you get disrupted. So it was obvious that we had to start figuring out a way to keep disrupting in the space, in the retail space, and that's how Lowe's Innovation Labs came to life in 2014. And the primary intent behind starting Lowe's Innovation Labs was dual in nature, right? It was a dual intent. One being, how do we solve for our problems, the problems of our customers and our associates today, which makes it more incremental. At the same time, we also thought about how do we, power the future of home improvement retail, the area that we are in. In fact, we are the second largest home improvement retailer in the world, right? So with this in mind, Lowe's Innovation Lab started out, and now the name sounds interesting because it's a labs, and but the work is not limited to a lab, right? So we don't work in a lab alone. We work and test out everything in real living labs of our stores and our customers' homes. And I don't know if you have heard of some of the work or not, but from 2014 onwards, we've been tapping into a lot of things. So for example, in 2014, we came out with consumer-facing robotics or robots in our stores. Something I'm glad to say that we were one of the first retailers globally to have done that, right? People have seen a lot of robotic works happening behind the scenes, but in 2014, having these robots come in front of our consumers in the stores environment was very, very interesting. Since 2015, we have been working a lot on AR, VR visualization, and we built our own bogies and rigs for which we have patents on to create 3D models of products that customers can now view sitting at their homes, right? And visualize a lot of different things. In fact, in 2015, we also launched HoloRoom. We have partnered with Microsoft for the launch of HoloLens 1 and, helping them out with a bunch of things. 2017, we created exosuits, right, for helping our customers pick up heavy stuff in partnership with Virginia Tech, so on and so forth, right? So there are lots of things that we have done. The recent being JobSite in a partnership with a startup called Stream, which is powering our pro customers, right, with the combination of AR, VR, as well as LiDAR. Now, as I've talked to you about some of these things, you realize that in 2015, for example, AR, VR was not mainstream for retail. But we, as I said, we have been a disruptive entity within Lowe's. We have been thinking a little ahead of what really is an application that could be created for retail using technologies, emerging technologies that may not be suited to retail at that point of time, right? So we've continued to do that so far as well. In fact, we recently launched a program in India called Construct by Lowe's Innovation Labs, and that has 7 different startups from across the country that we have partnered with, and they are serving a bunch of different things, including merchandising, AI-driven trend forecasting, automated content generation, talent acquisition, hyper reality or hyper real AI, and nanotechnology using sustainable next-gen home construction technologies, right? And key differentiators that we thought which were very, very important given the Indian landscape or Indian ecosystem were that we wanted to be stage and size agnostic. The reason we have to be a little stage and size agnostic is, it's important that when you're trying to solve for a problem, you don't want to be restricted to looking at startups at a particular stage or size. What I mean by that is sometimes a 3 people team, very, very young team could be very impact creating, right? The kind of capability that they bring in could be humongous, right? And co-developing that solution could make a lot of sense. And sometimes we work with a series C, D, E, F, whatever size of startups as well, right? In US, we work with Magic Leap, we work with best of robotics companies around the world like Boston Dynamics, Brain Corp, Boston Nova, etc. And these have raised a lot of funding, right? Magic Leap has raised more than $1 billion. So it's important that we create that flexibility to be open to working with anyone. And it's not necessarily only two entities collaborating, it could be multiple entities collaborating to create a solution which is futuristic in nature. Second is we are sector agnostic. Like I mentioned about the AR example, today if I talk to you about another technology that we're interested in, which is haptics. Haptics, again, is something which is not applied to retail today. It could be in medical technology, it could be in gaming. But we see there could be some interesting applications of haptics in retail as well. So if I focus our research or our partnerships only to retail tech, it kind of limits to where we are going. So we are open to different stage of startups and different sectors of startups. We do paid POCs only. So a startup can get $10,000 to $50,000 or beyond, depending on the scope of work. And it's very, very critical today to support the startups that we partner with, right? Because that's, again, a problem in India where the ecosystem has not been focusing towards, at least till a few years back, most of the corporate innovation entities were not really focused towards that, right? So now we are focused on that as well. We're flexible, light and lightweight. We're focused on real world execution, thereby creating a GTM strategy for the startups that we work with across North America. And the focus is very one-on-one, right? So it could be a 2-month program to a 6-month program, depending on the startup that we partner with. And that is why it's also important for us to be open throughout the year. So those are some of the key tenets of the program that we have launched. We're working with 7. We're just closing the 8th one as well. And as I said, we are open throughout the year. We'll continue to partner throughout the year and at least hope to work with 10 to 12 interesting startup partners, academic institutions, researchers, and innovators across the country. The current time of pandemic, I know we have really stressed on that for the last few months a lot. I personally feel that it doesn't really matter whether there's a pandemic or not, because the world is changing in terms of consumer expectations, in terms of consumer trends. People are constantly talking about creating better experiences, and for that, the technology volatility is also pretty high. Given all these things, from an innovation standpoint, we believe in a narrative-driven innovation, which means we are going to focus in the future. As these trends change and the technologies get ready, we need to know how to create that bridge to, let's say, get a 2025 or 2030 to 2022. And for that, we're always going to be looking at a future. Pandemic has, in many cases, increased the speed or accelerated the pace at which we're adopting these technologies to serve our consumers better. But our work primarily has not changed, right? We're still continuing to look at how do we solve for the problems for our customers and associates today as well as in the future. So that's a little bit of a take and context from my side.
Thank you very much for those amazing insights. Goes to show you can think out of the box and be ahead of your time, because a time will come wherein you should have been ahead of that curve in the first place in any case. So very happy to know, and personally from you and other friends at Lowe's, it is amazing to know about all the innovations that are happening in that particular lab. So thank you very much for that, Abhay. That brings me on to Shilpa. Shilpa, I'm also really excited because this whole thing is about, the doom and the gloom and how everything is sort of going haywire and so on and so forth. But amongst all of this chaos, we also hear of so many amazing stories. I agree that there are more gloom stories than sort of these celebratory stories. But I know for a fact, amongst the 5 of you present here, there have been tremendous amounts of positive stories and feedback that have been coming about. So, I would like to know from you your views on this particular topic of startups and innovations, opportunities and obstacles from your perspective, from your dealing with all your cohorts and other startups. How has that helped? And what is going on? Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you, Preeti, and thanks, Vivek, for a nice introduction. So just to give you an overview of what we do, so we work in Societe Generale. Societe Generale is not just a bank. We are a huge financial conglomerate, and we have multiple businesses within Societe Generale. So we have our wholesale banking division, retail banking division, we have automobile leasing division, we have customer financing, we have consumer factoring, we have iBanking, we have security services, custodian services. So as you can imagine, the kind of problems, challenge statements that come across from each of these business units are very, very tangentially different. But that doesn't mean that some of the solutions that we bring from India are not scalable. what we see is what works for one unit also works for another unit and also for another geography. With the pandemic, I know that there has been a change and shift, but like Abhay mentioned, I would like to echo that it's not been extensive for us. So our work continues. It's a small shift in the focus only, and definitely budgets have been cut, but not to an extent that that we cannot work with innovation needs, or we cannot bring startups. We cannot pay the startups, or we cannot engage with the startups. Right? It is just a slight shift in your focus. So any kind of digital solutions that was trending, for instance, your robotic interaction in a customer branch. Now nobody is going to the branch because of the pandemic. So people are looking at more digital means of transacting. So that means a lot of opportunities for startups in open banking space. A concept called compostable banking, which is made up of different offerings which can be plugged and played within the bank, right? So startups who have been working in compostable banking or digital bankings are definitely in demand, and we see a lot of opportunities for them to collaborate with Societe Generale businesses. And what this pandemic has also given an opportunity for the startups is for any startups who have been working on digitization channels. So COVID, in fact, has been the biggest, digitization effort, which has actually accelerated digitization efforts across all the companies. So it has identified gaps within the finance, it has identified gaps in HR, it has identified gaps in RegTech, it has identified gaps in the business itself. So anything which had a lot of dependencies on teams to sit together, there was no digital modes of working, have actually got highlighted during this pandemic. And there is an effort, a consolidated effort to sort of fix this, come through a straight-through processing for many of this, teams. So for instance, HR. So onboarding predominantly was a physical interaction. Now you can see that there is a shift, and many of the companies have adopted digital onboarding, for instance, for their employees. Initially there was a plan that, okay, it's going to last for 3 months, and I think we can freeze the hiring, and then it continues as usual. But I think after 3 months, everybody has sort of woken up to the fact that the pandemic is here to stay, whether we like it or not, and we just need to adopt and move on. So what can we do differently, right? So there are different solutions which have been considered for, like I mentioned, HR onboarding. So all of the companies have successfully implemented HR onboarding, virtual HR onboarding. They have been continuing with the recruitments. People are being inducted virtually. And with that also comes the fact of employee engagement. So how do you engage with your employees? Are there any platforms or startup tools out there which can keep the employee engagement high, right? So this is just a few touch points that I can mention, in the day-to-day transaction of all the offices. Specifically with the banking, like I mentioned, there is a huge focus on open banking. There is a huge focus on digitization channels. Fintechs with mature platforms who have held on to their value propositions can see an outlet finally coming through. I think this is actually giving them an opportunities to collaborate. Because this is not the time for banks to sort of explore, but rather partner with the more mature fintech platforms out there. Infrastructure is definitely something which is a huge opportunity for many startups who are in this space. It could be on the network side, it could be on connectable platforms, it could be on collaborative tools, project management tools, because people are working virtually, people are working remotely, people are working from 60 plus villages, from 60 plus locations, from what I heard from our Stockchain leadership. So people are working from everywhere. So how do you bring together all of them? How do you ensure that the work continues to being catered to? So I think there's a lot of collaborative tools which is being explored away from the Skypes and the Zooms. So it's an opportunity for Indian startups who are in this space. So some new technologies also being explored, such as are there softwares which can mask your background noise, right? So, I don't think there are startups who are actually focusing on this, but this is definitely an opportunity for them, because I think once there is a set habit of people working from home, I don't think it will reverse back immediately once even the offices are opening up, right? So, so I think there's a little bit less focus on IoT, a lot more focus on digital, and definitely phygital solutions are being deprioritized, and more digital solutions are being prioritized.
Thank you very much for those amazing insights, Shilpa. I totally agree. Any kind of adversity sort of pushes on into uncharted territory, something that we have always wanted to go. So solutions like work from home and all of that, we've been trying to get to that level, but it took a pandemic to actually push us down that path. And now that all of us are
Absolutely.
used to sort of a mix, a hybrid model, you're right in saying, it'll be a long journey when employees will actually, they might not want to go back. They might want a hybrid model, 2 3 days from home, 2 3 days from
Yes.
office, and it's the best of all the worlds. So thank you for those amazing insights. With that, it's a quick reminder for the attendees, please. This is a conversation and a dialogue, which means there is need for stuff to be coming from your end to us as well. There will be a live question and answer section once you've heard all the speakers with their views on the topic today. Two speakers down, three more to go. Only that much more time for you guys to put your thinking caps on and start making use of that question and answer section right at the bottom of your screens. Vivek has said to you once, I'm reminding you again. I will come back and remind you once again. With that, I move on and towards Gauri. So Gauri heads Maersk's Ocean Pro, accelerating innovation. My dear friend, lots of stuff going around in the logistics and supply chain kind of it. And one more thing before I actually land up at Gauri and ask him that question. Look at the panel today, folks. We have people from all kinds of domains. So there's banking and financial services in SocGen with Shilpa. There's technology here with Ashok with Intel. There's retail tech here, with Abhay and Lowe's, and then there is supply chain and logistics here with Gauri. So that's like a multifaceted or deep dive, a diversified view. And then to top it all, there is Millie here, who dips into each of these ecosystems for her varied needs and solutions. So, I'm like, oh my God, this is it. And these are the people, and all my questions are ready. So, folks, better be ready with those questions. With that, it's over to my friend Gauri. Gauri, what do you think? Opportunities or obstacles? And where is Ocean Pro headed? What is it doing? And what's going on over there? Over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Preeti. Thanks, Vivek. Just to quickly set context, we are very happy that we are doing this along with the rest of the panelists in partnership with LinkedIn Local. And the primary agenda that Maersk as an organization, which is little over 110 years old, to kickstart this journey of digitization, even for the industry itself, it spent the first 80 to 90 years digitizing the physical assets, or ensuring that there's innovation in the ocean, helping build better vessels, and that seemed like the real gig. And last 2 decades is where the new normal came into picture, right? So we've been working on accelerating the digital journey for the industry itself. And Maersk has retained the #1 position for quite some time, and we love to stay ahead of the curve in both streams of work, both from the physical innovations and also the digital innovations that we're bringing to the table right now. Ocean Pro was one of the byproducts of such efforts. About 3 years back, when we kickstarted our very own digital center here in Bangalore, we also wanted to do something with the local ecosystem. We wanted to take advantage of the startups that works out of India, tap into the biggest startup ecosystem, and see what we can do for a global logistics player. What logistic does for the real world is very equivalent to what Zoom and the video conferencing solutions are doing for the digital world today. It connects the complete line of business, right? Talk about Abhay. Every other retail business, every other orders that you place is somehow influenced by the logistics and supply chain solutions. Maersk took a stand that we don't want to remain just an ocean company. We want to step out and become a logistics integrator. And every step that we took after that was largely around that diversification, right? So we started moving into the warehouse operations. We started moving into custom house brokerage. And we tried to see how much we can cater to the customer end to end. The sweet spot happened when there was one such situation like a pandemic, right? When the customer can't really run around for 5 different parties to get his needs met, and they can work with one single operator, and trust became a crucial factor when it comes to any such situation. When it is normal, you could always experiment. When it is a pandemic, when there is critical situations, people go with trust for a brand. And we were very happy that we were able to retain that with the customers. we witnessed some very strong transformations in the way our customers interacted with us. Some of the stats say that under the last 1 quarter, the mobile app adoption for our customers, and remember we are a B2B business, we are not catering to every single customer, we cater for businesses, and mobile app adoption for businesses grew up by a couple of 100 times in this last 1 quarter. And we are one of the largest B2B websites by transactional value. For every hour, we transact roughly about $1.8 million. And that means that our digital presence became even more crucial during this tough times. OceanPro has been a vision of trying to bring this large ship of Maersk work with these speedboats that run along with us, right? And see how we could integrate the speed in the largest portion of our business. Interestingly, just in the beginning of this pandemic, we also launched ourselves the China chapter. So we actually kickstarted another version of OceanPro in China with the name Accelerating Innovation with Maersk, AIM. And we were able to run a completely remote cohort without any physical meeting from day 1 to day 120. We never met the startups face to face. It all happened completely over remote conferences, and they just graduated on the 6th of August. So the opportunities have been immense. There is no questions that is there a difficult time? Yes, it is. But how you see and how you optimize those bad times is completely up to you. And in terms of what we've been able to influence with our very recent cohorts or the startups that we focus on, is that our shift towards digital enablement for customer experience started increasing heavily, because we realized that if you're going to cater for the customer, their experience today is the Swiggy and the Amazons of the world. We don't want to be any complex in terms of the digital experience. Their expectation is set in equal power. They don't want to do a one-click purchase for a product and then fill in 10 pages of forms to interact with the shipping company. All right, so we try to match that needs, and we are actively working in that direction. Our last cohort that we graduated about a week back primarily focused on digital experiences of customer and how we can enhance our e-commerce platforms. So that's kind of the summary of what we are doing in OceanPro today and what Maersk is doing on the whole for the ecosystem itself. That's about it from my side.
Thank you very much for those insights, Gauri. And I'm sure there'll be, you've done 3 cohorts so far. I'm sure plenty more to go. And there would be a lot of success stories. So it's over to one of the most sort of sought after space when it comes to startups and stuff, technology, So that brings me straight to Ashok. In terms of Ashok, what are your views and your thoughts in terms of how this thing has either put a spanner into the whole innovation space, or do you see opportunities masked in something which the others cannot see? What is your take on this entire thing? It's over to you now for your thoughts, Ashok.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for taking time out to come in and join us on this panel. Many of you would be knowing Intel, so I would not want to go into details of Intel per se, but what I would say is that we are a young company compared to my other co-panel members. We are not a 100-year-old company, we are just a 50-year-old company, and we could be termed as startups in front of them. So considering that in a lighter vein, we have been at the forefront of innovation from inception. So we live on and thrive on inception, and Moore's law is a testament to that particular philosophy of ours. And what we are trying to look at is how do we utilize the resources that we have? So if you look at India, Intel India is the largest R&D facility outside of the US. We have more than 10,000 people over here and an equal number of people on a contract basis. So close to 20,000 people, engineers over here. And this being an R&D facility, it's focused on various aspects of SoC design for client servers and IoT, IP design, platforms, and core to our 4 or 5 focus areas which is cloud, AI, 5G, and blockchain. We've, as a company, we've invested close to around 30,000 crores into India per se. And recently, I would say that we've been engaged with the startup ecosystem for a long period of time in India. In fact, our first investments from an Intel Capital per se were with Rediff.com, if you remember that company long back. So we have been in this play from a pretty long period of time. And over time, we've now started looking at how can we help and support the startup ecosystem in India, especially the tech startup ecosystem. What I mean by that is we have four avenues by which we can engage with the startup ecosystem. One is basically looking at it from a joint go-to-market. So we have two aspects to our business. One is startups which could be useful to Intel look at Intel as a customer. And the second is startups who can work along with Intel to go to market to a larger industry like what you have on the panel members. So we have two different aspects to that. And there could be startups which have both those capabilities, both customers to Intel as well as maybe going with the ecosystem. So we look at four possible ways of engagement. One is joint go-to-market. The second is co-creation. So if there are startups which are in the deep tech space, we may want to work with them and co-create solutions, which then could move towards licensing. So that basically takes you to the point of saying that, okay, if Intel becomes a customer or we go jointly to sell that solution outside to a broader ecosystem, how do we do that? And there are various modes of engagement on that. Then there is the Intel Capital, which is the investment arm, which looks at startups at a deep tech startup point of view. And it needs to align with the areas of focus which Intel is in. So if there is an overlap, and yes, there is a differentiated solution, I'm pretty sure that Intel Capital would be interested. So those are four broad areas besides the merger acquisitions. I mean, that's basically when we acquire companies. And we've been at the forefront of acquisitions recently, as well as in the Intel Capital point of view over the last year. Every year, on an average, around 14 odd startups are where we invest in at a worldwide level. Now, from this particular engagement, I basically want to talk about, we have been running cohorts over here, and we also engage with startups besides the cohort, which is on a regular rolling model. And we intend to increase our focus on collaboration with the ecosystem, which is with the industry players, as well as with the venture capital ecosystem, and try and see how we can get the best Indian startups put up in front of, say, not just the Intel worldwide community, but also the world. We really want to put this as a kind of a framework where we can go in over there and showcase them. Startups, quickly, I mean, in the last 30 seconds that I have, what I want to say is that startups are differentiated from the other companies. We do work with all the large players. But why do we work with startups is because they are agile. If they can come out with solutions quickly and don't behave like corporates like us, that's their differentiation. They need to have a USP, but they also need to be quick at execution. If they can't do that, then they compete with the other larger entities, which will not give them that differentiated success. That's it with me right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. And there will be some amazing insights coming in later on in the live question and answer section as well from you, Ashok. I'm pretty sure of that. So thank you for that. Before I move on to the final panelist for their comments on the topic, here is a quick reminder once again, dear attendees, this is a two-way dialogue. Please let those questions coming in into the question and answer section of this webinar. Another couple of things. There were a couple of you that have raised your hands. Request you to please write what you want said into the question and answer section again. We would not be able to take raised hands at this point in time. Again, a quick reminder, let those questions keep coming in. If you want to dive deeper, Because it might not be humanly possible for us to take all the questions today, please reach out. Happy to connect over LinkedIn. All the profiles are out there in the post so far. So if you need any more information, anything about the accelerator programs, anything about innovation happening in these 4 or 5 respective people's domains, please do reach out. With that, another quick reminder about the questions coming in, and it's over to Millie, my dear friend, last but not the least.
Thank you, Preeti.
Thank you. You dabble into all of these incubators and accelerators for your own needs in terms of logistics, in terms of technology, in terms of BFSI and retail tech, and so on and so forth, for your own business, you know. So, seeing as in everything that has been going on in these particular spaces, what are your views on the entire topic today in terms of startups and innovations, opportunities and obstacles? Over to you, Millie. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Preeti. Thanks. And it's a very welcome change not to be told, ladies first. So thank you. Makes us feel, truly at par. So to coming back to your topic and the questions you asked, Preeti, I'll give if it's okay, I'll give a little context about Diageo. I heard Ashok, 50-year-old company. Diageo in its current form was established in 1997. So I think we should be categorized as infants. And it's a very interesting mix where we entered India in 2012 with the acquisition of United Spirits. We have, and though we have brands, so this is our 200th year of Johnnie Walker. So we have a very interesting mix of a modern company with some very age-old brands. My division, which is called Futures, which is not called Open Innovation or the Accelerator Program, and I'll give you a short, and background to it, established in 2018 with my hiring into the firm. My first assessment was too late in the day, too much has happened in the industry. It is easier to partner and leverage on the work of, other cohorts or other programs like Abhay's or Ashok's or Gauri's or Shilpa's. I have sourced solutions from all of them for shop floor automations to logistics to retail tech from Abhay's, innovation lab to Shilpa's. We sourced some AR, VR related solutions from her cohort. So that model has worked brilliantly for us, given the scale and the depth of the organization. I think partnering, and we have a lot more. We have a few more partners in the industry. We started, as I said, journey so far. We've made just one investment into the startup world for a category which is, from an advertisement marketing e-commerce perspective. We are a dark market in India. So why would we even indulge very digital heavy? I think we were early from our industry perspective in this space, given the restrictions or the environment, the regulatory environment in the country. But it has worked brilliantly well for us. At least I can talk about the last 1 year's journey where we have incorporated startups to solve our problems, from brand protection, which was very manual heavy, to moving it to digital, to a lot of functions in supply chain, to sustainability, one of our biggest piece, because we especially from a water perspective, water management perspective, and replenishment of water into the communities. To now we are moving to a lot of spaces. Even the concept of safety has changed in the last 5-6 months. So what was basic safety standards, if they were from a compliance perspective 5, now we've moved to 5 more have been added to it. And that's where we saw a quick, what again Ashok and Gauri and Abhay have been mentioning, or Shilpa, that the agility with which startups work and can bring solutions to the table, given the scale and complexity of large organizations like ours. It is not feasible. Our running itself takes a lot of energy, bandwidth, focus, to be able to mimic. Or so it's better to again partner. I always say, what you cannot do, that this is the era of partnerships. You need the right partners. Startups have been amazing in filling in a lot of these gaps or our needs. Also, it was Another aspect I'll give you is when we go out to look, one is problem solving. So you have a problem statement, what we call a use case, and we go out there and look for the right partners, right solutions, right, technologies to fill it in. The second is in the process of looking for those solutions, we realized there were so many more that would benefit us, but we weren't aware of. For simple examples, if we were looking for hygiene or improving upon the safety and hygiene standards, we didn't realize that the startup world had figured out vacuum cleaners which were already sanitizing the whole space from a virus perspective too. So we've been learning a lot, lots to learn from the industry, from all the partners. Look forward to it. I'll stop here, Shilpa. I'll give it back to you.
Thank you very much. And for me, two things stand out from there. One is time and tested collaboration, because that is the way forward. I think it's all about finding those relationships, those people in your network that you can collaborate with rather, and come up with something drastically different to what you could do. The second thing is, if it is not your core competency, it is better to let somebody else do it who can do it better than you. And there's no shame in admitting that. So two very, very valuable sort of insights that have come out for me personally. Thank you, Millie, for that. A quick reminder once again, dear attendees, some questions have come in. There are about 13 questions that I see here so far. We are getting very close to the live question and answer section. Before that, what will happen is I will ask a quick question to Gauri that has now popped up into my mind. And that is, Gauri, in your cohorts that you have seen, so many startups have come and gone. What are the kind of innovation that you have seen around, and where are all the opportunities lying? If you can help me understand that very quickly, I think that will put my mind to rest in terms of these couple of niggles that have been there. Thank you.
Great. Thanks for that question, Preeti. So over this last 2 years, we've roughly met about 1,000 plus startups firsthand in the intent of curating 20 great players who's worked with us, both in India and China, put together, and at least 11 different niche technology spaces, right? Starting from IoT, blockchain, AR, VR, and in very recent times, we worked with companies in UX research using brainwave mapping, and also players who are into advanced marketing insights using your e-commerce traffic. So it's a variety of startups that we work with. It'll be unfair for me to pick and choose few, but I can call out some of them which is popular in the LinkedIn platform as well. So one, we've created immersive learning content for our vessel, the Tripoli vessel, and our warehouse operations in Shanghai on 100% 360-degree content. When we kickstarted it, the intent was to primarily use it as a learning material for our in-house employees, but the uptake was so high, we eventually used it as a marketing campaign. Right, so it reached out to 60,000 plus people out there in the world. And primarily when this pandemic happened, our ability to show how our warehouse functions to our customers, even without having them to visit it, is a great window for us to use, right? So it just happened to be a great moment for us. Another one that I could call out is a very recent one, which is Entropic Tech, is an organization that we partnered with. The VR content was done by Lavela Pictures or Monolith Media Company. And Entropic Tech is an organization which works on reading your ocular stress as an end user and brainwave mapping to understand how you respond to websites and e-commerce content. It was partly biology and technology coming together for me when they were trying to narrate the whole story for me. Some very diverse content, right? So it doesn't mean that we are a shipping company and we work only with digital freight forwarders and payment platforms. That's not the case. We try and assess ourselves in par with every other technology company. We are also a technology company which does shipping. That's how we see ourselves largely. In terms of opportunities, we've kept our digital agenda on top of everything that we do as an organization, and that's been the journey for the last 4 to 5 years. During this pandemic, or at least in the last 6 months to 7 months, We've had we have enhanced our capability to cater for a new kind of market called the spot market in the shipping, and this is the first time in the industry where a customer can just go through a shipping website like a typical product shopping experience without having any ambiguity on the pricing aspects. That's called the spot market. We've launched a product called the Flow, which is specifically focusing on the supply chain management piece of our business, anything outside of the ocean. So to be a real integrator. We've also accelerated our journey towards TradeLens, which is our largest partnership with IBM as a corporate. It allows the complete shipping world to come into the blockchain platform. And this is not just for Maersk, it's an industry-wide initiative. So we have almost, to be honest, every other competition is our collaborator right now. They work with us to make TradeLens a reality. All these are taking big speed steps in this pandemic situation. And because of that, our hiring in the digital space hasn't stopped at all. When the whole world is worried about, hey, do we have job opportunities? We are hiring roughly about 600 plus technology positions in India and yet other regions. We have roughly other 300 plus positions in the GSC world also, which clearly signals out that nothing has slowed down in the way we operate and what we could achieve during tough times. So that's kind of the short answer for what you wanted, but in favor of time.
I'm sure we could go on and on with this, in terms of all the opportunities and also the innovation, but ever the optimistic in me finds this hiring sort of one word, that seemed to do the magic, because between all this doom and gloom, all we've ever been hearing about is retrenchment, rescinding of offers and so on and so forth. So well done for that. Thank you so much. That brings me to a quick reminder once again of those questions coming in, because what is going to happen now is I am going to hand over the baton to Vivek for the next section of this intervention, which is startups and innovation opportunities and obstacles, LinkedIn Local India Online, powered by Maersk, and Ocean Pro by Maersk, accelerating innovation. Vivek, all yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Preeti. So before we start the Q&A for all of us here, I have a question for Millie. So Millie, since you're tapping into all the other 4 accelerators present today for your sector-specific solutions, my question is, what are the major pivots you have seen in the last 5 months?
Thanks, Vivek, for that question. So I'll start with a couple of our initiatives. There is, currently we announced Raise the Bar, which is reviving your restaurant industry and pubs and bars, because that's a sector that has really suffered from a business perspective. Now, when you talk of reviving these spaces, the first thing that comes to everybody's mind, or the focus, is how do you make them safe? Second is, how do you make it contactless? So we're working on a whole lot of solutions, and very quickly, I'm a big fan of the agility and speed at which startups work, and converting, we are seeing all your contactless dining solutions around menus or ordering mechanisms, and digitally, everything has shifted also in the interim to home. So how do you reach out to people in homes, again through digital mediums? I am seeing a lot of startups bring brilliant solutions to the table very fast, very quickly. Even in the security space, safety space, self-cleaning, self-sanitizing gloves, to, you don't even need to, when new workers come into the factories, you have solutions where they don't need to touch, for an entry, they don't need to record their admission into in work anymore. It's all just digitally sensor based done. Most of these solutions are all devised by the industry. So I'm seeing a whole new set of solutions come to the table for us, just like how Gauri was mentioning. Any solution that we looked at or we decided to work with last November or December or early Jan, we have gone ahead as usual, as normal. So that continues. Plus, we see a whole lot of set of solutions very quickly being tabled and being catered to us as per our need. So that's how I would say they've pivoted.
Thank you, Malik. It looks like you're taking the best of everybody. So the four companies here working hard and you're taking the best from them.
True, but being late in the day. So my worry was we were too late in the day to enter. But thanks to all the partners, and I would say they're all the right partners. They helped us.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that. Great. So we move on to the next important section where we have a lot of questions, some interesting questions come in. We'll have the panelists answer those questions. So I'm going to start with question number 1. And this question is for Abhay. Abhay, the question is from Yogendra Sharma. He asks, what's the scope of live shelf pricing in the Indian retail system? And what are the categories do you think it may be most useful?
Okay. Thanks. Thanks, Vivek, for the question, and thanks, Yogendra. I'm assuming, okay, I'm just reading the question, the scope of live shelf pricing, right? So my perspective is that, shelf pricing has a bunch of different areas or attributes that have that actually factor in whether you want to do a live pricing or you want to do a near real time pricing, right? Or sometimes even beyond that. One of them is obviously, what are we talking about as a shelf life of any product? So basically, for people who do not know, shelf life is is the period of a product on the shelf to which period it can be utilized effectively, right? And if it goes beyond that period, it is not to be utilized. So typically for fast moving consumer goods or perishable goods, the consumer shelf life is very, very less, right? And that's an important factor to consider. The second thing, in my opinion, is also about the competitiveness of the retailer, right? And how competitive they want to be as against other retailers, right? So if you want to look at a FMCG product, a fast moving product, then in that case, live pricing would be effective from an Indian standpoint. Having said that, a lot of problems can also arise, in terms of creating confusion for consumers who always flipping out in terms of understanding when the prices would go down or high, and they would keep looking at things. So I think you'll have to look at creating a balanced approach in terms of creating this kind of a live pricing for a certain set of products and not for the rest of them, right? And that balance could also mean near real time. In a lot of cases, it fluctuates on a daily basis or after a few hours, etc. as well. What's the frequency of the change to make it near real time or live is something that would be a very, very strategic call from each retailer to the other retailer as well, and from the product to the next one as well. So that is my perspective from an Indian retail ecosystem. And also the last point on this, right? It also, at the end of the day, most retailers want to be consumer centric. So in some cases, it's also important to really understand, like Gauri and mentioned about Entropic Tech, right? And I think they've worked with Intel as well, if I'm not wrong. With these kind of startups, right? You can really understand what the consumer really wants, right? Can you do a focus study group with thousands of people to really assess if it's making sense for them to do live pricing, right? Live shelf pricing. And if it works out that way, given the geographical nuances that India has, or the cultural nuances that we have in India, then yeah, why not? I mean, it's not that big a deal from a technology standpoint to create that. That's my perspective, Yogendra.
Sure. Thank you so much, Abhay, on that. All right. So the next question is from Leroy. He is asking questions for Gauri Shankar and Ashok. Would you recommend that startups apply for patents to protect their innovations, given that it is expensive and time consuming? What are the alternatives for startups to protect themselves? So Ashok, you can go first, and then Gauri.
Okay. So what I would say is that you need to time it. It depends on the market which you want to go after. And just applying for patent is one part of it. But if you really have a differentiated solution, like I said, speed is everything. How fast can you execute to actually getting the solution out into the market is critical. Now, if you feel that you have that capability, it doesn't matter, the cost doesn't matter. There are various ways in which you can basically figure out how you can get either reimbursed. There are schemes from the government for reimbursement, but that is one aspect of it. But there are various models which I've come across where there are people who also will help you with filing the IP, basically the patents. At the same time, try and see how they can maybe fund some of that, because they want, I mean, it could be different business models involved in that particular process. But we do come across that. And I think that getting to international patent is going to be in the markets which you're going to play in is critical. And that needs to be done relatively fast. But it will have to be, I mean, this is not something which I can make a generic statement. It has to be looked at, and for each one, you'll need to give them a perfect advice, and the lawyers are there for that specific thing. Gauri, over to you.
Okay, I think Ashok covered it all, but just my piece of view is that I love patent-heavy startups, no doubts about it. But if you ask anyone in this panel or even in the crowd, that a better validation is an existing customer, a paying customer, or a revenue. So market is all that matters, and speed to market is what Ashok rightly highlighted, right? So even if you have a great patent and an amazing product, how soon you take it to the market, what timing does it take, and how you can get it validated from your customers itself, that matters a lot more in my eyes. Yes, it is worth investing, but this is more crucial in my eyes. So that's just my thought.
Can I just add, Vivek, to that? Because when we look at startups, we at least encourage them to file for patent. And as Gauri said, though the criteria primary is how many clients have they served? Because when you are serving a client like ours at scale, then are you capable of catering to that scale is one, but we do encourage them, if they haven't filed, to file for patent, at least.
I'd also just like to add to that, right? Slightly different perspective on this, which is that, when you're looking at disruptive or more, radical innovation, that time, patents and what you're trying to build out from an R&D standpoint is very, very critical, right? In terms of, what you're trying to do, is it protected, right? Because, a lot of these R&D innovation space requires years for you to build out something meaningful, right? And it's not easy for them to get their first client very easy while they're building it out. But if they're protected while they're doing that, right, it becomes easier for them to take that right path and not just look at building an MVP and then, creating incremental value on top of that, but rather take that time to build something which is meaningful for the consumers as well, even though it might just take the next 2 years. And in that case, some of the organizations also help them, like Ashok mentioned, there could be government organizations, there could be other corporates who are vested in that kind of R&D. And they would say, okay, listen, we'll back you up financially as well. And let's figure out, how do we develop the right kind of, co-develop the right kind of product. So that's a slightly different perspective when it comes to non-incremental, but more radical innovation or disruptive innovation.
I agree with Abhay on this. If it is especially incremental innovation, I think by the time your patent comes through, I think the technology is already outdated. I think technology is changing at that phase. That is where I think the startup ecosystem in India is especially need to be patented for sure.
Sure. Thank you, panelists, for answering that. So next question is by Jayanti Lal. He's asking, Maersk has always been a pioneer in digital transformation within the container shipping space. So after these disruptions, there were some ransom attacks in 2017 that disrupted all the operations. The way Maersk handled it was plausible. Kudos to the Maersk team. This is not a question. This is a compliment, actually. All right. So there's a question. Okay. The question is for Shilpa. Shilpa, which business models and trends will drive the biggest challenges in the industry, say in the next 2 years? This question is from Iftikhar.
Okay, so like I mentioned, I think composable banking is something that predominantly large banks like ours will be looking at for the next 5 to 10 years. And if there are more platform models, it could be for the traditional businesses on a platform model, but which can also collaborate between multiple players. I think there is definitely a big market for those kind of businesses for sure with the BFSIs. And any kind of digitization channels, right? So it could be predictive analytics in coming together for custodian fees. That's one of the challenges that we are also trying to address this year. So anything to do with predictive analytics on top of existing traditional businesses would be interesting. RegTech would be definitely flourishing in the next 5 to 10 years, because I think all the BFSIs is a little weak, especially during the pandemic situation, because there has been a moratorium which is being granted, right? And the whole cost of moratorium is being today being borne by the banks. So on top of it, I'm sure none of the BFSIs would want to pay heavy fines, and this is something that they want to comply with all the regulatory needs. So anything which will aid them in regulatory compliance will definitely be a good business opportunity and a good business model if you can streamline the specific product or a platform. Sustainability is going to definitely again be a topic which I think multiple businesses will look at. So if you are a startup which is into a sustainability space, I think definitely there is a good market again. Yeah, I think pretty much on compostable banking, digitization platforms, sustainability, as well as RegTech.
Sure. Great. Thank you. Thank you for answering that, Shilpa. So now we have a couple of questions here. I'm combining them. And this is open for all the 4 of our panelists who have the cohort. So it is asking, Ayush is asking, what is the success rate of your respective cohort programs, either acquired by you or by others, or getting further funding? So please, anybody can start. Abhay or Gauri, you can take that.
Okay, I'll probably pick it up to start with, and let the rest of the panelists follow. One, we don't define the success by acquisition. We clearly see if we are able to build a relationship with the startup, that's a success for us. And in most, and in some corporates, it is more on the investment side. At least in Maersk, our ideology is about how we could actually make them an IT vendor or a solution vendor for Maersk itself, and see them as equal partners as we move forward. That's been the primary agenda. So we are right now out of our engagements, we at least have 4 to 5 different scale-ups in multiple geographies. And when I say scale up, they have an ongoing relationship with Maersk, and Maersk is a paying customer for them. So that's how we measure success ourselves. And that's about 30 to 40% in terms of success rate. But if you look at the overall benefits or the outcome of a program, I don't think it is purely measured by the conversions alone. It has a lot of byproducts, sometimes for the startups, sometimes for the corporates. So that's my take on this question.
Thanks, Gauri. Abhay, Ashok, please.
Okay, so I can go next. So if you're looking at how we measure success over here, it's more in terms of trying to understand how the startups actually gain traction in the marketplace. So are they looking at, are they able to get more customers? Are they able to raise more funds? So I'll give you a perspective of the current 2020 set of startups that we are working with. I won't go into the historic ones, but the current ones are the ones impacted by this current situation. But what we found is that if you have something which is differentiated, you can still raise money. So 4 out of our 11 guys have actually raised money, including one pre-series A by Sequoia in our current batch. So I would say that the opportunity is there. Yes, the cycle times may increase in terms of how much time it will go through the due diligence process, but funds are available even now. I would not say that funds are dried up. The second is you need to look at what are the challenges which are there, and accordingly start looking at how you will pivot yourself from your existing solution. So how fast can they how agile they are to try to see how their use case could be used for some other purpose. At the same time, maybe at a later point in time when things restore back to normal, how can it go back and address that existing use case? So that's another important metric that we are looking at in the current times. Third is how can they reuse existing assets? Because we know that all corporates typically will be starved of the kind of money for innovation. So leveraging existing assets to try and see how they can build innovation on top of that. That's a third measurement which we look at. From an investment point of view, from an Intel Capital point of view, we've not yet got any Indian startups typically which are making the cut to that level. But we are working with a few of these startups at the licensing level. So I wouldn't say that there is no hope. Give us the startups, we will be more than willing to invest if we find them apt.
Thank you, Ashok.
I can also take a shot at this, right? So I think, both Gauri and Ashok have covered very, very interesting models in terms of how they've looked at, the startup partnerships in terms of defining the success criteria. And ours is no different, right? For us, internally, when we define success, it's not about the success of the POC, but rather the success of the solution in terms of creating value for the organization, creating value for the startup, right? So that means that, typically if there's a clear impact and we have scaled them up, right, and there's a clear impact to the business, then that's successful. And, that means the startup would actually end up getting a vendor contract, like Gauri mentioned. In some cases, we also go beyond that and we do licensing deals. There have been acqui-hires as well, and there have been some investments too, right? Now in US, where Lowe's Innovation Lab started in 2014, it's been an open innovation platform. It's not been a cohort model, right? So we've worked with a huge number of startups. A lot of them have raised funds. A lot of them, have, worked with us and are continuing to work with us as well, right? And, from an India standpoint, we've just started the cohort about 2 months back. Or it's not even 2 months, actually. It's been a month now. No, a couple of months now. So from that standpoint, we are still early to talk about this. But, it's also, for me, it's also about how do you help the startup scale up, right? What's the kind of mentoring? I'll just give you an example. One of the startups is into hyper reality. Now, within our team in Lowe's Innovation Labs, we have a bunch of people within the team called Creative Technologies who have come from different walks of life. So, for example, we have people who have built a life support system at SpaceX with the recent Dragon capsule, and they're part of the team today. There are people who have built a hybrid battery infrastructure for Tesla. They're part of the team. There have been guys who worked on hyper reality and they've been pioneers in the DVR technology or deep fakes as well, or hyper reality. There are a bunch of patents around that. And one of them, in fact, if you remember in Fast and Furious 7, Paul Walker unfortunately passed away while the movie was being, built, right? And they had to recreate Paul Walker. He was part of that project too, right? So we have people like that. And one of them could probably is working as a very strong mentor who's actually pioneered this technology of hyper reality. He's a mentor to one of our startups, right? So it's not just about, them getting a contract, but actually helping them scale up their operations, right? And specifically when you're talking about disruptive tech, how do you do that, right? Do you have enough strength internally as well as with your external mentor network to coach them into developing that product? And that also is an important success factor if, beyond that, they're able to build out a successful product and that goes live into the market, either through us or through some of our partners, right? So that according to me is also a success factor.
Okay, to add on, I think I pretty much echo what my fellow panelists sort of mentioned here, right? One is, I think the 3 C's are very important for any startup: customer, connect, and capital. We do take care of the first 2 needs, which is customer and connect. And we do have a very similar approach of extending vendor contracts to some of the startup partners. So each cycle is different and the cohorts are different, right? So in the best cohort in which we had about 70% conversion, but a minimum on average would be around 38 to 40% of conversion ratio. It's not just conversion, but we also look at scaling them up within the organization. Like I mentioned, the opportunities within SocGen can be multifold, right? So if they have worked with retail banking, then we can see if there is, wholesale banking that we can engage with. If they have worked with our African banks, then we can look at Poland or Russia for them to implement the same solution. So we do try to scale some of the solutions within the organization as well. So basically industrialize enough that they have multiple contracts with the bank and not just, a single one. But I think what is really important for as a takeaway has a KPI, has an accelerator, would be real-time testing of the product of solution. So I think that's the biggest differentiator. Some of the startups are definitely seeing a value in working with corporate accelerators. So we have seen products and platforms which are built, but those are not implemented in real time. So when they work with us, they get a real-time feedback, they get mentorship from the functional experts, they see what are some of the challenges with the corporate adopting them. So once they fine-tune their product or platform, I think we do not have a no competition clause, so that they do work with multiple other banks after going through the proof of concept with us. In some cases, it's also been insightful for them where they have pivoted their existing products or platforms. So what they thought was a problem is never a problem, but the problem was actually something else. So once they start working through a corporate accelerator, they identify the pivoting needs. And that is the biggest, I think, a differentiator with corporate accelerators. Society Generale has been a very conservative organization, but that's slowly changing. So in the last 2 years, there have been extensive acqui-hires, extensive acquisitions. There has also been money which is being put into some of these innovative startups. Specifically in Europe, we have not been able to kind of bring that into India, but that is definitely an ambition for us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shilpa, and thank you, panelists, for answering that. So now over to Preeti for the other questions.
Thank you for that, Vivek. And thank you so much, everybody, so far for those amazing queries addressed. With that, a quick reminder, attendees, please be very clear and concise in terms of your questions. Let there be certain questions to the point and not backstories and context to it, because I'm sure we will get all of it right here. Please put down the name of also the panelists that you would want this to be addressed to. And before I move on to my 10 or 11 questions that I have lined up all here, another request to all the panelists, please, let's try and take all those questions. So let's also be clear and concise from our end in terms of whatever we can say very quickly. With that, I'm launching a poll here, which is a feedback for all of us, an exam for us, whether we have passed with colors or not or what. So attendees, please take the poll while you are here listening to everybody. And with that, I come on to the question, and this one is addressed for everybody. I think I am going to come to Abhay first with this. Abhay, Raj says any kind of innovation asks for physical proximity, because for getting creative, you need to meet as a team, to brainstorm with each other, be in that physical environment wherein you can bounce ideas off each other. With this enforced circumstances of all working from home in silos in different locations, how has that been? Is it a challenge? Is there any real innovation still happening, or what is the way forward? And I think this question is really important for quickly to be addressed by all of us, because it is a major concern. When you work, man is a social animal. So if you work in silos, what happens to the creativity? Over to you, Abhay. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Preeti, and thank you so much, Raj, for the question. I partially agree and disagree at the same time, right? So one is that, yes, creativity so far has been amazing, when we have all put our heads together, we have discussed a lot of things together, we have built out things, and specifically anything that has a software and hardware convergence, right? So that's where it becomes a little more important to be physically present at the same place. Having I don't think any kind of work has stopped, right? In fact, we work with startups across the globe. And it's not always that these startups are working together with us. Gauri mentioned this earlier, the whole program where they didn't even look at a startup throughout, right? And that's the same with us. We didn't have a physical launch. We had a digital launch. We have not really seen the startups. We have not discussed with them, except for over calls, right? We have not really discussed with them over face-to-face. And yet we are building out amazing products. A lot of these are going to be digital. A few of them are going to be physical as well. We are working with a startup which is using nanotechnology, and they're creating nanocomposites such as graphene to build a better and stronger building block of homes, right? The next generation of homes. They're creating conductive inks, which can help us in gesture recognition and creating smarter applications within home, right? So a lot of these things have physical component and digital. And, I think what is very, very important while we do this is also to build the right culture to get your heads together and build this out, right? So we recently, for example, within the team, we had a virtual offsite. This is the funniest thing in my head. I never thought that, I would say that, we would have a 4-hour virtual offsite. We were discussing the quarter 2 progress and figuring out what needs to be done in quarter 3. But a lot of us would hang out together for lunch, would go for the coffee and tea breaks, would hang out together, brainstorm together on whiteboarding. Today, a lot of these digital tools are enabling that, right? But it's also important for us to take the time together, take time out over the digital tools and keep still brainstorming, right? Keep the emotional aspect high. So I think using that, so far we've been managing pretty well. Yes, on the hardware bit, it's been a challenge. One of our startups has to create a 360-degree of me. They're trying to create my digital clone or my digital avatar. Now, for me to do that, I have to set up a background screen, the green screen, right? And there has to be a 360-degree bogey, which will capture all my emotions and expressions as well as the voice, which means I'll have to get some of the equipment to my home, get that studio kind of a thing set up, which otherwise would have been very easy in an office environment. But now it's okay. I mean, we're getting that done in my home in one of the rooms, and we'll see how that goes, right? So you always figure out, that's the whole point of innovation. You always hustle, you always figure out a way to make things happen. And we are doing that. So I don't think it's going to be a big damper. There's some problems, and I'm hoping that, people like Ashok, are able to help us out from a hardware standpoint as well. How do we, we look up to Intel to figure out a way to solve for some of the hardware issues and challenges that we are seeing.
Thank you, Abhay, for that. And I think you have pointed me towards, the logical sort of way forward. So I'm coming over to you, Ashok, rightly said. What about creativity and hardware and solutions and obstacles and opportunities? Over to you. Thank you.
So I would put it two ways. One is, like I said, we are the second largest R&D center outside of the US, right? So we have people who are working in collaborative teams at Intel on engineering products which are cutting edge. These are basically, you can't slip up on schedules over there. So people are working on those particular things at this point in time. We can't say that because of this remote working condition. So we had provisioned technologies which can be used remotely by all our employees. So right now there are very selected people who go to office, but most of us are working from home. So if we as a 50-year-old company can do that, startups can do that. And our cohorts typically have always been virtual. I mean, I would say that even though we have physical space for them to come and utilize, what we have seen traditionally is that most of them do not want to come and stay here. They want to stay with their teams. And we used to meet them once a month in a physical manner, but now that has become virtual. And actually what I would say is that the opportunity to collaborate has increased because now the calls are more frequent. They seem to be finding it easier to call us ad hoc as well. We have mentors who are calling them whenever they get time. So there are various additional benefits is what I'm seeing out of that. Yes, to add to Abhay's point, what we did is all our physical products, especially for the edge inferencing kind of platforms, we made that available through our dev cloud. So there is a cloud available from Intel, which anyone can sign into. It's an open cloud environment which people can sign into and get access to that to experience right from all our CPUs, integrated GPUs, accelerators, etc. on that cloud. So that helped stem some of the aspects of problem. Yes, we also had to do a lot of physical shipment of hardware. And that in this period of time has been a bit tricky. We have had to take the pin codes of all those places which are containment zone versus non-containment zone and ship it accordingly. But we've managed to do that. And I don't think we've dished any of our current batch. All of them have received their products which require them to start innovating.
Thank you very much for that. And yeah, brilliant, amazing. Thank you. Gauri, China launched a cohort right in the bang middle of the pandemic. Your cohort graduated. So then obviously there was some sort of innovation still going on virtually from a work from home scenario. How did you sort of go through all of this and what happened there with startups from your end? Over to you.
Very similar to how Ashok put it out. We've been a virtual cohort from the beginning of it. We've never positioned ourselves together with the startups. There were few physical engagements. Yes, we loved the fancy demo days. We loved, connecting with the ecosystem. That was fun, no doubts about it. But that eventually had to fade out. I don't see it, being a deterrent in any ways. In many possibilities, it has just allowed us to interact a lot more. I connect with my team in China as if they sit right here in India, right? And there's no difference between the team which sits in India. They are also through a video conference, and so is the team in China. So the barriers are much lesser. There's a lot of tools which we could put to use for co-creation and collaboration. To name a few, there's Teams, there's Miro. There's a lot of whiteboarding solutions that is there in the market right now. It's not the way it used to be. You don't have to depend on sharing documents back and forth. You don't have to write emails. It can be a lot more interactive with the kind of enablement that we have right now. That being said, the curation of startups and the time we spent in identifying startups, there was a little bit of a challenge, because in the past it was easier for us to quickly bring in a bunch of teams together in a single room and spar it out and finalize saying that, hey, today this is the selection that we make. But that became a lot more complex, right? So to deal with a series of approvals and getting the legalities managed completely on a digital spectrum. We obviously identified a lot of technology which can support that, but it was new for us to experience the whole cake. But I think it's been a easy transition. It wasn't something that completely hit us by surprise. Even if the world was normal, I would have still worked with my team in China all remote. And we just miss a couple of physical meetings, which would allow us to celebrate the success there too. So that's the only point.
Thank you very much for that. And Millie, I'm coming to you now. This question is from Deepthi Verma. And she goes, what insights frame your perspectives on the next wave of food tech innovations, especially post-COVID?
So I can throw some light on food tech, though we are the beverage company. See, food tech needs to move from, and it has already moved. See, you have food waste, you have packaging material out of food waste, you have agricultural products out of food waste, and that is an area we are also exploring. I'm also exploring, again, with a lot of startups as a part of sustainability, because we have a lot of grain waste. There are ways, but it still needs a lot of research and development to convert food waste into processed food, which is edible. So a lot of models, like if you see the US, they've already converted, in fact, rotten fruits into candies for kids. There's a startup in the US, I can't remember the name. They collect stale bread from homes and convert it into ale beer. There is Singapore University has already successfully tested food waste to convert into granola bars. So we're very inspired by all those and looking at the tons of food waste or grain waste, to be specific, that comes out of our processes. We are looking at how do we make it edible, otherwise converting it into packaging, plastic, fertilizers is existing, but we want to move in that direction. If that answers, Preeti, your question.
Yep, absolutely it does. Thank you very much for that. Shilpa, I am coming over to you now with a question from Vikas Dua. He goes, what is your view in government-driven initiatives like Startup India? Are they making an exponential difference to the startup ecosystem in the country, as would be the expectation, or they're not? I mean, your views of enablement from the government. Over to you, Shilpa.
Thanks, Preeti. Thanks for this question. I think definitely, I think the government is very conducive for the growth of the startups, right? So one is they have enabled a lot of capital through, I think it could be Atal Incubation Program or many such incubation cells where they have funded from 1 crore to 10 crore of funding per incubator. Right. So this could be incubators in the universities, or it could also be incubators which are private, or it could also be government established incubators. So a lot of funding has been coming through from the government. The Startup India, again, helps people connect with multiple accelerators, multiple, channels of connects, right? So not just the accelerators, but there are a lot of ecosystem enablers for a startup to flourish. So that connect is happening definitely through the Startup India program, and they have been one of the first programs set up at a national scale. And we are also partners with Startup India. In fact, whenever we have the application going up, we definitely put also the connect points on Startup India portal. Again, there are also state driven programs, such as it could be NASSCOM here in Karnataka, which is driving the 10,000 startup warehouse. A lot of connects coming again from some of this centers, right? So I think pretty much all of us look at the ecosystem as a collaborative ecosystem, and existence of government programs and brings legitimacy to the growth of the startups. And compared to when we are talking to our European counterparts, I think we are leaps and bounds ahead with government initiatives for the growth of startups, for sure.
Thank you very much for that, Shilpa. Amazing insights. So here is a question from Vinay, and it's open to whoever wants to answer this. Actually, very quickly, I think in a couple of lines, all the four accelerators can answer this, because I think this question keeps coming back and forth all the time from the ecosystem. And it is, how long do you take to decide on funding a startup? What's the process? And do you take a stake for your investment? I know it is not you that is directly doing it, but the enablement is there. So from that experience, who wants to go first is more than welcome. And then very quickly, let all of us sort of try and address that very important question. Who's going first?
Okay, I'll go.
Okay.
So Maersk has its own venture arm called the Maersk Growth. We have roughly about 12 to 13 investments in our portfolio right now. None in India yet, but the assessment generally takes as long as 6 to 8 months in terms of understanding the startups market fit. They meet 100 plus startups on a monthly basis to establish a deal flow, and during this process, it always drives the venture arm to invest in a startup purely based on their capability to bring in a niche technology or a radical innovation, like Abhay pointed out, right? So that stands out in most cases, and you could probably visit Maersk Growth's page and look at some of our portfolio startups to understand the spectrum at which we invest. In terms of OceanPro as an accelerator, we work as a deal flow or a pipeline for Maersk Growth's team, and we work hand in hand, exchange notes, and that's how some of our references work with each other. So that's kind of a quick summary of how our venture capitalist arm operates.
Thank you very much for that, Gauri. Abhay or Ashok? Ashok, okay, there you go. Over to you.
Okay, I can. So in our case, I would say that, like Gauri said, it is a time-taking process. We normally co-lead investments at a Series B level and beyond. So if you see acquisitions which have happened recently, it's like the Habana, which is a 2 billion in case of Israel, or MoveIt, which was again in Israel. But on an average, we'll be looking at, as I mentioned, anywhere between 10 to 14 odd startups across the year. So on an average, around 120 odd million, which goes into that kind of investment. Now, are you ready for it? If you have something differentiated, like I said, right, it's not up to us. It's basically up to you to be able to showcase your USP and compete against a worldwide market. And this is one thing which I would like to tell the startup ecosystem. I mean, at least most of the guys who are younger here, do not please put in over there that we are the world's #1 or India's best or India's first, unless you've done due diligence. Please make that, because that itself gives us an indication of what exactly is there, unless you can prove your point beyond that. But yes, if you have a differentiated solution, please write to us. You can reach us anytime. We are more than willing to come in over there and pitch it to our investment teams.
Very encouraging. Thank you very much for that. Abhay, it's over to you for that. Thank you.
Thanks, Preeti. So I like the second part of the question, which was around, do you take equity for equity stake for the investment, right? I'm not sure if there's any organization who doesn't take equity stake unless you're talking about a grant of grant or maybe a paid POC, right? So then those cases you typically don't take equity or a stake in the company. Otherwise, you always do. So not sure what that meant. But we typically, when we work with startups, we always do paid POCs, right? So that means basis the scope of work, whether it's co-development, whether it's R&D, or whether it's basically deployment as well, just quick validation and deployment. It can go from, let's say, $10,000 to $50,000 or beyond that. So totally depends upon the scope. And then of course, if it's a paid POC, that's a commercial value of the kind of work and the time that you're doing, right? So it's not against any equity, and we don't charge or we don't take any equity. Having said that, in terms of investments post that, typically any investment from our side is only post a POC. So like Gauri and Ashok also mentioned, right, it's very important to understand the USP and the strategic fitment of that startup with us, right? So in terms of what's the future roadmap, what are they trying to develop, how differentiated is that, right? So after the POC, if we are convinced that it makes sense, then on a strategic level, we decide to take a call whether we want to invest, whether we want to acquire or acquire or license, whatever, right? So it totally depends upon the strategic need of the organization as well as the strategic fitment of what the startup is building and how important it is to us, right, from a future roadmap. So yeah.
Thank you, Abhay. I think what they meant by taking equity was more from a perspective of direct VC funding. Here they forgot that maybe we're talking to accelerators, and accelerators do not take any equity into anything. So I think there was a little bit of a mismatch there, but I'm sure they got the answer because that's what we are here for. Before I move on to the last question to Millie, Shilpa, your views on this particular topic that we are dealing with right now.
Thanks, Priti. I think just to echo with what Abhay mentioned, the only thing that without equity that comes is the grant that we enable for co-creating a proof of concept. Like I mentioned, we have a separate arm called SG Ventures, which looks at acquisitions or investments into startups. So far, pretty much the acquisitions and investments have been in the European world. It is yet to reach India, or we do not have that mature fintech ecosystem yet that we have sort of made the acquisitions possible, but that's definitely on the plan. So it depends on each of the business units. So the retail banking recently had an acquisition of an open banking player in European market called Shine. Right. So for our IT iBanking division has invested predominantly on AI-based trading platforms. There have been acquisitions on that space. There have been voice to text kind of startups that have been acquired by our iBanking division. Our African entities have acquired wallet solutions who are big players in Africa. So each division and each geography have their own need, and if they see a fitment, then definitely there is acquisition is on the cards, and definitely equity based venture capital money is also on the cards through our SG Venture arm. But I think from an Indian startup fitment, I would see more technology solutions which are geography agnostic. Those can definitely look at investments from multiple SG entities.
Thank you very much for that. So then again, it proves the point there is not all doom and gloom. If you have the right idea, right execution, and the right product market fit, there are buyers out there. So thank you very much for those inputs, Ashok, Gauri, Abhay, and Shilpa. And for the very last question, it's over to my dear friend Millie. What excites you? What is the next wave of innovation you are looking forward to?
I think everything. We working on so many futuristic technologies right now. From, as I was mentioning, I'll go back to security systems. And recently, so one of the things I'll tell you we were struggling with is QR codes are very easily replicable. But you add, and we've been struggling with it for the past several years. Still, a startup suggested, and they came up with the solution that you put a ML layer to the QR code, and then you can secure it. And we were like, finally somebody has a solution for us. So from and one of the things we are aggressively looking, I think Shilpa mentioned that sustainability. So for us, a huge area of focus, circular economy, lots to be done in the space. As a goods company, that produces goods, alternatives to glass, alternatives to plastic, alternatives to paper. So there's so much to be done. Alternatives to, wherever we have carbon emissions. So we are one of the lowest in the industry, but then becoming neutral. Our waste water techniques are, if they are at 70 or 80%, how do we bring them to 100%? How do we stop tapping into community water or groundwater? What are the other sources? So that's one huge area of focus. And again, when you talked about delaying, that's a research that was supposed to start now. Despite all the slowdown, it is starting on time. So we didn't delay any new initiatives as such. So I would say if I have to pick one, though very difficult, Preeti, for me to, I would say sustainability, because we just had all our goals advanced by 7 years. That's the urgency with which we are working on it.
Okay, thank you very much. And amazing, the array of innovation that is out there. And we actually are, in some sense, much ahead of the curve anyway. So it's like right now, pick and choose. What do you pick and what do you choose? So I totally get what you're saying. With that, I think Atul and Ayush, your questions were very specific to Gauri and Abhay. I promise you, I will get you an email response to those, because they are very specific to those particular two segments. And anonymous attendee, I am so sorry. Had you put your name over there, I could have done the same for you. But because you haven't, I don't know who you are, and I cannot get you the 3 questions to be answered from anybody. So please, next time when you go to a webinar, please show up, put your name down, put your email ID down, so that we can get back to you. With that, it is thank you time. Thank you, dear attendees, for being here today. If you were not there, none of us would be here to address all the queries and questions. Thank you to the amazing panel that has been so patient with us, for engaging with us in the run-up to this webinar. It's been an amazing journey and lots of learnings and insights. I am going to go back and dwell upon it overnight tonight and come up with a few learnings of my own. Thank you to my dear co-host and friend Vivek for yet another session of this LinkedIn Local India Online. Startups and Innovations, Opportunities and Obstacles, powered by Maersk and Ocean Pro by Maersk, Accelerating Innovation. A quick reminder recap of next in line is Diversity Dialogue with Samir Chadha, who's the CEO of KPMG, with Nandini Sarkar, who is the Global Diversity Head of Boeing, and a stellar other number of panelists. So with that thought, once again, thank you very much, all of you. Until next time, from all of us here, stay safe and take care.